right, another day, another China story. Today we're going to talk about surveillance in China, or I guess surveillance beyond China, because everyone knows that China's been monitoring everything and everyone in China for a very long time. And this is reaches from the pretty heinous stuff going on with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang all the way to more mundane stuff like monitoring and controlling and removing memes on the internet. It goes really runs the gamut from absolute total control of what people are doing and reading and thinking and who they can contact to no, I don't like that meme. You can't do that. And China's obviously also blocked outside websites and services and data portals for a very long time. Facebook and Google, they don't even exist in China, right? So people often just forget these literally don't exist in China. But all this is old news, right? The more interesting thing that is still kind of behind the scenes is, well, China monitors everybody else too. It monitors people around the world as well. And, like the United States with the NSA and other organizations, there's a massive dragnet that China is pulling across the rest of the world to feed into its databases and its servers and its political and economic goals. Really, this is what's happening. And this is very scary stuff, right? This is the sort of thing people really fear the Communist Party is doing, but they don't ever really want to believe it. They don't think it's quite possible. They think the US government or other people must be doing something to prevent it, but they're really not. And a key reason is just that modern computers and databases and algorithms just make this so much easier than it has been really ever. What China could do now is way better than what the US could do, for example, in 2007 or 8 or 2005 or any of those times. The technologies have just gotten so ubiquitous and powerful. And also, most importantly, people just display everything they're doing. Like everything you do, you go online, you go on the internet, you have your phone that knows exactly where you are all the time. It's become so easy to track people and to monitor them and do whatever you really want to them just because we are just spewing off data in every direction. And a lot of people who are more interested in privacy and things, anonymity, and all sorts of things that are more on the libertarian side of the spectrum have been worried about this for a very long time. And well, the time is here, the time is now. The question is always just, well, does it matter, right? Like if the California government knew what you were saying, or the Tennessee government, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it does matter if something like the Chinese Communist Party knows what you're up to. And in general, what the party has been doing is basically increasingly it's targeting people overseas with the digital investigative and police techniques that it developed in China to monitor and control its own population. And the way this is working is it really started with Chinese people who go abroad for a while, right? So let's say you're a Chinese youth or 19, 20-year-old, and you go to University of Chicago to study electrical engineering or something. Those are the sort of people who get monitored. I mean, this is the very high value sort of person. Oh my God, this person can come back, have great knowledge, contribute to the workforce, upskill the labor force, all that kind of stuff. But they can also become infected with ideas about what the Communist Party is doing, whether that's good or bad, and all of that. So I didn't just start here, but this is a really big piece of the puzzle. And in general, the party has been using people who go to the United States for training to come back and bring useful skills, technologies, ideas, whatever to China. Obviously now these guys are being prosecuted a bit more, often unsuccessfully, but what's been going on. It's just moving beyond that, right? So it's going beyond, oh, you've left China for a while, to, oh, you're in China for a vacation, or you are an overseas Chinese person who's never been to mainland China and isn't a citizen of the People's Republic, yet you're still watched. And then after that, it just expands to everyone. And the basic priority, so it's not, they don't care about every single person. Same way the United States government, yeah, it's probably tracking all this stuff, but it probably doesn't care what some, farmer in the Netherlands is doing on a day-to-day basis, and it probably couldn't even figure it out, right? Who knows if the correlative data is even appearing, but that doesn't really matter. What matters in China is political speech more than anything else. So this is basically about, are you for China or against it? And so basically at the root level here, what China is doing is it's categorizing everyone based on their level of interest in China and the valence, right? So basically, are you reading or speaking or watching videos, a lot of videos about China? And are you positive or negative, right? It's much easier. So I mean, it's more sophisticated than that, but that's the basic gist of it. And that means that people like me who sit and talk about China all the time, I am definitely on the list. And it's kind of easy, right? Because I have videos, they say China in them. I say the word China all the time. So that racks up the counter on the, how many times I say China. Ping, I rise to the top of a database list. And then, you go see what it is. Well, is it positive? Is it negative? You correlate the words, but especially if you're speaking or doing videos, it's much easier. Obviously, if you just watch videos, it's kind of tougher. But in general, yeah, if you're watching this video, you watch a lot of videos by people like me, you watch a lot of videos just about China in general, or the world, or the Uyghurs, or Taiwan, or Hong Kong, or basically any of these issues, then you're also getting pulled into the dragnet. Whether that matters or not, it kind of depends on who you are and what you're doing and what leverage you may have or what resources or whatever it is. But that's just the nature of where things are going right now. And I mean, what's kind of funny about, at least with me, is that I actually get all sorts of bots and sort of paid people who, Chinese sort of government stooges who come on, they either comment this or comment that. It's been happening for a very long time, but they often don't know what to do with me because sometimes I say, oh, you should think about this, and sounds vaguely like it's good for the party, or like for China, vaguely complimentary. And I say other things, it's like, well, clearly he doesn't like the party at all. So in general, the system is not one that allows for a lot of nuance or texture or complexity. So take it what you will. I mean, again, they're concerned with political control and stability and the legitimacy of the Communist Party, right? So if every sort of person who left China was just surrounded by people who just hated on China all day long, it's kind of a dangerous situation, right? It kind of makes sense how this thing formed, in the sense of, well, we are a super authoritarian megastate who's trying to keep things together, but we need things from the other world. We have to send people out to get it. We need the training. This is over 100 years now. We need the training and the technology. But do these people come back really believing in China? So there's all these videos. There's a really famous video. I think it was a woman in, she might have been Chinese. She might have been in either Australia or the United States. And she was gone, and she was probably commenting on social media, responding to a video or liking something. Remember, all you like things, the amount of time you spend on a video, basically anything you write, anything you comment, what you search for later, all these things can be pulled into the database, and there's markets for this data. A lot of this data isn't just coming from China. You can buy this data about what we're all doing all the time. It's out there, and so there's public and private databases for all this stuff, and it's on sale, right? I mean, there's a really good line, right, that if the product is free, then you're the product. And for data and the way it works kind of in the modern digital economy, or for modern digital surveillance, it is kind of like that. So yeah, that is what the party is doing. And well, if you just realize you're part of the sort of this database, welcome to the club. But this is the way it's going to work. And what's really crazy about this is just, again, how sophisticated this is becoming, all of this stuff. And a big reason why is because there's real money and tech talent going into this. So major companies in China, some of the biggest, both the well-known consumer side ones and also more Chinese, less well-known, innocuous corporations, are really involved in this. This is a major part of the technological push the Communist Party is engaged in, right? So we associate technology with like new iPhones, big rockets, new satellites, whatever it is, stuff like that. For the Communist Party, when political control is everything, new technologies, some of the most important and powerful and interesting and compelling new technologies, are just things that let you understand and control people. And the massive amounts of data coming from all of our digital devices and all of our digital behavior is by far the largest gold mine that any sort of authoritarian state has ever found in this regard. And China is the most capable country in the world to sort of exploit it in any way. So there's Russia and other countries, they can't really do this at the same level. And some real, obviously, in addition to all the pure manpower, right? So there's great companies, a lot of, not great, but there's like capable companies that are really involved in this. And then there's obviously a lot of manpower behind the scenes. Like there are hundreds of thousands of people who just go on the internet and they're tracking things, they're moving things. This is not just all algorithms, right? This is a manpower intensive activity. You can actually go, you can draw a graph of when the like Chinese online bot armies or people who are paid by the the state to comment on different things or delete things or whatever, you can make a graph of when they're at lunch, because all their activity just goes down because they're all eating their sandwiches and food, and then by 1 o'clock or 12:30, whatever it is, they're all back to work, and all the online comments and stuff return. So it's definitely both of those things. But we really again have to say that this is not like it's funny, but it's also bad. Like there are dark arts being performed and learned here that are at least an order of magnitude, at least 10 times worse than anything you can imagine for like a shady American political group, right? Some sort of financing group or political research group or whatever, the Cambridge Analytica, whichever flavor of that sort of group that you think is really heinous. What's going on in China is way worse, and it's gonna really hit a lot of these companies that are involved with it. So already, companies like Huawei or SenseTime or ZTE or DJI and a lot of others, and especially these consumer companies, this is going to be really, really bad for them, because like I said, this is a big part of the push the Communist Party is engaged in, right? This is not just like, oh, we want to like monitor our enemies or whatever. It's like, we need to monitor our people and our enemies to have any hope of staying in power. That is more the train of thought the party has. It's not, this doesn't feel optional to them. So it's pulling in companies from all over the whole spectrum of China, really. And there's a lot of money made in state contracts to basically just monitor different things, put in cameras in certain regions, add things to certain apps, and to do whatever. And I've said this before, but a lot of this was really the proving ground, the testing ground for all this has been in Xinjiang. So it is kind of horrific, but what is basically happening is the tools that were, those police investigative and criminal detention, all these sorts of tools that are part of the Xinjiang security apparatus there, they're being sent out to the rest of the world. And the problem with all this is just that it runs counter to basically the political values of essentially all Western nations, and even just the basic political authority of basically every country, right? So this is difficult. And what's going to happen eventually, you guys are already warned that eventually there's going to be some big case that's going to pop up, and a foreign citizen will be cruelly targeted in some way by the system, by Chinese censors, by Chinese it's kind of hard to know these MSS officers. It could be intelligence, it could be government, it could be all sorts of ways you can apply leverage to people. But in general, the Communist Party hasn't been trying to overtly push all sorts of foreign nationals, right? So right now, it's gathering a lot of data, and it's trying to control the messaging on these digital platforms, right? So it's concerned with political activity, political speech, basically, online, and it wants to make sure that the whole world isn't bad-mouthing China. But the problem is, basically, the whole world is bad-mouthing China, and they can't really do anything about it. So it's one of these terrible but yet obvious and continued places where you can't really do anything about this. And if you try to do something about it, like, say, target people around the world who are talking about China, that can very easily blow back in its face if, for example, let's say a U.S. citizen or someone else was targeted and that managed to blow up in the news. That would just enrage everyone even more against China, and that could lead to huge repercussions. But this is one of those many areas where the party is so used, the same way that Americans often think that China is just like the United States. China kind of assumes that the rest of the world is like China, that the people in the rest of the world will sort of accept policies and behaviors and things that are very, very normal in China. And it really depends. I mean, different aspects and elements of the Chinese government have more familiarity with the rest of the world, and they have it in different flavors, and sort of whether it's, I was really associated and worked a lot with importers or exporters, or I had to deal with port activities, or I had to deal with trying to use certain healthcare technologies or patents or whatever, or I just traveled a lot around the world, I did this with my family, it doesn't matter. There's all sorts of different cuts of experience you get, but the sort of really core experience with the political values and behaviors and institutions of other countries, China is very weak on this in general. And a great way to see that is just to look at the entire Belt and Road Initiative and sort of what's been happening with that, which I'll probably do a video on at some point. But in general, it's a tough thing. And this specific area of just pushing out the Chinese surveillance dragnet all around the world is a very unwise place to do this. Once more, it's just it cuts so close to all these values that the Western citizens hold so dear. And of course, the great counterexample to all this is, well, isn't China just being exactly like the United States? And in a sense, that's true, because the United States collects information on everyone, everywhere, all the time, and it's been doing it for a really, really long time. And unfortunately, I mean, a lot of countries have now copied this, and that is kind of what's happening. You could easily just say, well, China is just doing exactly what the U.S. is doing. And to make it worse, the U.S. actually does use a lot of this information to do to conduct military operations all around the world. Which, if China was doing that, that would quite literally, that would be in a very, very weird, different place if that actually managed to happen. But still, nonetheless, this is, you could almost say, well, doesn't the U.S. do this even worse than China, even to more of an extreme by tacking on military operations to this? And you could say yes, but really these countries are so different that if you get into this sort of frame of analysis, you're usually so far off from where the ground really lays with all of this, right? So you could say that, but in the end, the political systems in each country, their values, their perception by other countries, their roles in the world, the sense of themselves, and basically the way the world has become accustomed to them behaving is just so different that this is just another area where it's really tough for China to try and be exactly like the United States is, right? So just like trying to create a global coalition not even a global coalition, but basically a global bloc that is a big economic force and that could potentially supplant or replace or compete with the United States and its sort of economic system built after 1945, that's a lot harder than China realized. Well, it realized it probably needs not just a couple percentage points better of a system, but like a 10x better system, and that is really, really hard to make. Just like it's hard to make a phone that is 10 times better than the iPhone, right? You just get a bunch of different iPhone competitors that are basically all the same, and it doesn't really move the needle much. It's similar in this sort of area. And in general, trying to just imitate a country like the United States is both something every country does, because you can't really avoid it. The United States is sort of the top dog, and everyone is looking to the primary, sort of the leader of the group, the leader of the pack, to see how to behave, what to do, how they do it, if you can imitate it. And that's just the natural sort of human or political group behavior. You're always sort of doing that. Challenge is, you've got to know why these countries are different, right? You have to know why you can be like the United States in certain ways and you can't in others. And also, why is the US this way? Why is it able to do these things? That is beyond the scope of this video, but it is very interesting. And there's really good reasons, and there are explanations for this stuff. It's not just, well, power lets you do this or power lets you do that. There are much deeper explanations that are really fascinating, really important to know. But in general, China doesn't have the perspective that allows it to do that, right? It is trying to recreate the celestial kingdom it's told its people that it's had for a very long time. And once you get into a place where everything is controlled within the country, so you have the ultra nationalism and surveillance and information control inside China, and try and push all this and then other things all around the world, it really starts to shine a very harsh light on what exactly you believe and whether it's correct at all. And that means basically all the stuff that people in the world are saying, like maybe China's bad, maybe COVID came from a lab, maybe this, maybe that, all these things that you can't really stop. Maybe the Chinese vaccine doesn't work, maybe et cetera, et cetera. Maybe people who spoke out about COVID early on were immediately arrested. All of this stuff, you really can't fight it. And the deep, deep challenge, like beneath all of this, is just, well, can the Chinese system survive all of this bad mouthing? Basically, if the Chinese system wasn't controlled, the information system, could it even survive the vitriol spewed around the world about China, right? That's a really good question. And yeah, I will say one more thing on the United States too. We should all be like, just to be clear, the United States, like the way it worked in China was that the surveillance kind of started with the people and then expanded the Chinese people, then expanded the rest of the world, and Chinese minorities into the Chinese people and the rest of the world. In the U.S., it's kind of supposedly more of the opposite, where the U.S. has strong private protections of individual liberties. In the United States, it could not monitor its own people, yet it monitored terrorists around the world, and then through the Patriot Act and other things, it sort of came back and started monitoring, using those techniques on U.S. citizens. But we kind of know, as far back as J. Edgar Hoover, the U.S. government has monitored and done way more things to U.S. citizens that are extrajudicial, extra legal than we're told, right? That's pretty obvious. But in general, the difference is that there is a system that constrains the U.S. government, right? There's a constitution, there are individual liberties, there are state liberties, there's massive limits on what the federal government can do with police and investigations and all sorts of things that you just don't see in China, right? In China, no one constrains the party. No one constrains the party, and the party can basically push this information system as far as it can, and it probably will. There's nothing out there that will stop this outside of basically a massive blowback from the rest of the world, right? So waiting for that big event to happen, someone that gets terribly targeted that actually surfaces. You got to remember, bad things have been happening. Chinese government has been doing bad things all around the world for forever. That's normal. But the question is always, does it appear salient to the world, right? To the audience? Does it actually rise up in various political and media organizations? It's just a question, right? China's been on the radar forever and ever, but we're actually getting to the point now where there's so many issues that it's very likely even that this could just continue to slide under the radar forever. And the systems are going to get better. The databases are going to become more or larger and more complex and more sophisticated, and there's not much stopping. I mean, you look at AI, you look at the way that China, the government, is treating data within the country, which I'll get to in another video. This is really moving into a totally different realm than anything we've seen from any authoritarian state in history, because they've just never had these tools available. And well, I think that is enough for now. So you guys now have a bit about the terrible and kind of scary surveillance network that's being pulled around the world. It is a counter to the American surveillance network that's also around the world. And yeah, if you want to hear what else China's up to, make sure to subscribe to this channel and definitely turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Like the video if you enjoyed it, so more people could actually see it. And of course, comment or message me if you have any questions. And that's it.